being recorded.
Okay, that answered that question. Okay.
Kind of sassy.
All right, it's 6:04. It's time for our regularly scheduled council meeting for Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. Clerk, certify the meeting notice, please.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs? Here. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Here.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Here.
Thank you. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Next, we have the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll go down to section F. F1, our monthly staff reports are in your packet. If you have questions that you would like to discuss or ask now, you can, or you can contact the department heads at your leisure. Okay, we'll move on down to Development Services Department Notice of Decisions.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
permission to poll the council.
Yes.
Council members, does anyone have concerns or feelings about an adverse decision that needs to be made note of? No.
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 Okay, thank you. We'll move down to item G1. This is the third reading of ordinance 1047-24. Chief or Charlie, are we set on this? Getting a nod from the chief. Affirmative. You had a question?
I just had a couple questions, Mr. Mayor, if I could
Yes.
run through it real quick. Thank you. Mayor, Council, my legal memorandum on this starts on page 65 of the packet. The proposed ordinance is on page 76 of the packet. This is the third reading, so I think we have ferreted out most of the issues that I've had going through the first reading and the second reading. If you go and look at my memo, there are a couple issues I'll just highlight right now for the audience. On page 66, the council decided not to have an additional $250 administrative fee, so that was taken out of the ordinance for this final reading, hopefully. Alcohol Review Committee, that was modified pursuant to the instruction of the council that the makeup of that committee is going to be based on what the mayor wants. We won't put it in code. We'll just trust the mayor to come up with a good committee there. And the committee will meet when needed. The previous version said they'd meet monthly. I think staff and the council thought that was maybe a little excessive, so they will meet when the chief of police asks them to meet, so that's been changed. Let's see here. Removing the hearing officer on page 67. During the first reading and the second reading, there was a hearing officer that was going to help for different kinds of public hearings. I think the council followed legal's recommendation to take that out. It just seems like it's an unnecessary step, so there's no longer a hearing officer. On page 68, I talk about the range of points. I think I made the change that Councilmember Jorgensen wanted on the first reading regarding aggravated assault and battery and assault and battery on law enforcement. So that change was made. We talked a little bit about the right to a public hearing in front of City Council. That's on page 68. So the way it's currently written is that people, a licensee will have a right to a hearing in front of council if the committee is recommending either a revocation or a suspension of the license. So they have due process baked in there. They also have due process if they want to appeal a decision. On page 68, I just have a paragraph about the public notice issue. There was a discussion on the first reading and the second reading whether there should be some additional public notice. I went back through according to my notes from the second reading, and that was an open topic still. So I have no provisions in there for additional public notice issues. I summarize it on page 68 of the memo. I'd happy to put that in if the council would like me to. I think that is it for the memo. I did have one question on the actual ordinance. and I have it highlighted, and it's on page 76 and 77 of your packet. The way this is broken out is that most of the hearing procedures have been taken out of the code, and so we're going to have those adopted by resolution, so that way we can be more nimble. We will still have procedures, but the council decided to take that out of code and put that into resolutions, so we're still working on that. So then there is hearing procedures. Whenever the committee recommends either a license revocation or suspension, it goes to city council hearing. That's the way it's currently written. And then if somebody wants to appeal a decision or ask for reconsideration of a decision, that also goes to council. And so my question is how much time does the council need to come up with a written decision on something like this? If you look at page 77 of the packet, I highlight within 10 days. And then later down, I highlight within 60 days. And so the question is when should the written decision be due after the hearing? Because the way NAPA had it written, they had 10 days in one place and 60 days in another place. I think 10 days is not enough time, personally. I would lean towards making a recommendation of either 45 days or 60 days. With that, I stand for questions. Thank you.
Okay. It doesn't mean we have to wait 45 or 60 days. It
Correct,
just means we're giving ourselves time. If circumstance comes up Thanksgiving week and we end up trying to get through Christmas and we're canceling meetings for the holidays and that sort of thing, gives us a little break. Any objection to 45 days?
No.
No.
Okay. And then on the noticing issue, a question I have is, I think we're good with the notice once the decision's been codified by the council. I don't know about publishing a notice on an accusation because there's a chance it could not be validated. So if we've got a violation, Charlie, does a hearing have to be noticed?
It does. It'd be noticed as
Okay, then there would be, that would be the noticing provision, because if we had to have a hearing. So that kind of answered my own question, didn't I?
It would have to be noticed on the council agenda. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So you,
Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to follow my question is, in personal situations, if somebody is arrested, that becomes public record.
mm-hmm.
And it's published. I mean, it is on the state's website or the county's website, and I see no reason to try and diminish or not make public certain violations. And certainly if this city and the council believes that this type of behavior and conduct of a business merits code, I don't see any reason not to make it public. Is that, are you saying, hey, there's no reason to publish it until it's noticed up for council? Because there would be a lot of activities occurring prior if it ever came to council, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a decision you made. I'm kind of running on the innocent until proven guilty kind of a scenario. but
Well, lots
you're
of
right.
people are right.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You can pull up on the website and see who was arrested last night and put in jail. And I'm pretty confident that there'd be justification for any accusation that was made, because that would be based on a report that we get from the police department. So I think either way, I don't care. If the council wants to, I don't know where we'd put it, how we display that.
Mr. Mayor, I think the discussion was a simple notice on the police department site. Is that? Am I recalling that correctly?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I remember the discussion being one of the websites, whether it's the city's main website or the police department website, and I understand that they're kind of all linked together now. So-
Correct, correct.
So yeah, a website, whether it's the main website or the police department website.
What do you think, Chief?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen. My intent was once the council or whatever the final decision was and the appeal was over, we're gonna do a press release and we're gonna put it out on our website to let people know, hey, we have this code, this was enforced, and this was the time that the council or the board decided that whatever if it's whatever establishment it is, that during this time to this time, they're not gonna have a beer or wine license from Garden City at turn, then the state pulls the liquor license and the county pulls their license, so during this time frame, there's no sales of beer, wine, or liquor.
So that's a little different than the accusation.
Yeah, that's quite a bit different. And frankly, I could go either way. I mean, we all are in agreement that this is a code for deterrence, right? A strong deterrence. And again, my position is, I don't think there's any reason to protect or shield any business or individual that is violating the laws of the city, or potentially violating the laws of the city.
If I remember from Mr. Wadhams correctly, even if we convene a board to discuss it, that's a public hearing, so that would have to be noticed. And so that notice, since it's separate from a council meeting, would be any typical other notice we post it here. We could post it on our website, and we could post it like on our front door at at the police department, stating, hey, we have a public hearing for review of the police department, asking the alcohol licensing board to look at sanctions against whatever establishment that it is.
I think that's fine.
Any objection to that?
Jorgensen, how do you, maybe with some artful language, we could include like the word allegation or alleged violations. I just like the idea that kind of innocent until proven guilty type thing. So an allegation is an allegation, and it's noticed up because there's going to be a hearing and it's under investigation, versus there's been a violation, and the hearing hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to violate somebody's rights and come out and judge them before the process. But yeah, whatever words surround it is fine. I think the point is that we don't shield or protect those individuals or businesses that are breaking the laws in our city.
Okay, is everybody good with what the chief just discussed about the notice being provided when we are going to have a hearing? And is that okay? And then, Mr. Wadhams, you can word that in a fashion that conveys the information to the public and what the allegation is, and then that'll go on wherever we put those notices, I guess, on the police website. I don't know where it would go on our website.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, can I ask a clarifying question, which is, do we need to codify that, or can we just include that in a resolution down the road? I don't know if we need that in the code. We can just put that in a resolution, or just have a working procedure. But if the council would like that baked into the code, I can write it into the code.
Well, I'm always a fan of resolutions because something could change down the road, and then you don't have to go through this whole process to amend a code. But that's up to the council.
Mr. Mayor, I concur. I think a resolution rather than putting it in code that's my opinion. I don't want to speak for the, but Mr. Wadhams, did we answer your question? So it sounds like there would be notice of first hearing, and then notice if it comes in front of the council, correct?
That's what I heard, and I was going to go back. I always go back and listen to the audio. If that's the consensus of the council, I'll make it happen.
And then if they're found guilty, then chief would have the press release, right?
Yep.
If there's a penalty, I guess.
Okay, so for purposes of this third reading, the amendment that I picked up was that we're giving ourselves 45 days to produce a written decision once a decision is made. These other parts of the discussion will be dealt with in resolution form. So if the council chooses to proceed with the third reading, the third reading would be would include the amendment to clarify the 45-day language. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move for a third reading by title only of ordinance number 1047-24, also noting that conclusions of laws and findings of fact written notification will be given within 45 days of the finding.
Okay, you've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion on the motion? Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Third reading of ordinance 1047-24, an ordinance of the City of Garden City, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, amending or repealing Garden City Code Title III, Business and License Regulations, Chapter 2, Alcohol Beverages, Article A, Liquor Control, repealing all ordinances or parts thereof to the extent they conflict with this ordinance, providing all other ordinances included in the official code are still in effect, notwithstanding some provisions thereof being eliminated, providing for a severability clause, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Item G2 is the motion to adopt and publish ordinance 1047-24 as amended.
I so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Thank you. Item G3, council staff is asking that we continue this ordinance discussion to a date certain of 11/25/24.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have a question in it, as this ordinance is presented in the packet, is part of the reason to request, for the requested continuation, is that the language needs to be cleaned up, or is there certain components that aren't yet addressed in what's presented in the packet?
Lisa can correct me, but I think she just hasn't had enough hours in the day to get through everything.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Jorgensen. Charlie has indicated that there is one particular section that we were going to remove from code, and he has now additional information showing that we need to add that back. Any other items will just be clerical or cleanup, but there was one particular section that needed additional research.
So I appreciate that. I have a follow-on question. So in certain, and this is education for me, I'm not, but in certain instances it references state code, but it doesn't point to that code section. Typically, do we include the section and subsection of code that's being referenced?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, there has been an internal discussion about whether we should reference Idaho code. The benefits of referencing the specific Idaho code section is that everybody can just look at it and then pull it up if they want to. The downside of doing that is from time to time the state legislature amends the code sections. So if the state legislature amends Idaho code section and we have reference in our code, then that mandates that we also have to go back and amend our code. So there's two ways to think about it, two thoughts on that. One is to keep it kind of vague, and so you can be nimble. And then the other side of that is some people think you should cite the specific code section so everybody's on notice on exactly what the issue is. So you could go either way on that, Councilmember Jorgensen. But we have had internal discussions, multiple internal discussions on what is the right way. So I would say the right way is what council wants.
Does staff have a preference?
I lean more towards just leaving it generic to Idaho code. We currently have in this code items that refer to Idaho code 67-something something. and it's completely different now. And the challenge is, who's gonna catch that? How are we as staff gonna know? I mean, we know some, because there's a lot of legislative information put out, but trying to catch those and going back to our code and updating those references can be a bit tedious.
Mr. Wadums, does it encumber your staff at all to look up the current code if we need to know what it is?
No. Happy to do that.
Okay, council have a preference?
Mr. Mayor and council members, the reason that I am asking, and I will point everyone, is on page 88 of the packet, and by the way, I'm all for keeping things short and sweet. In section 1.8.2, I believe it's section A, let me just double, oh, wait, I'm in the wrong section. 1.8.3, I apologize. Subparagraph A, when we go general powers, the officers and members of the police department shall have power provided under the state law. And that's the entire paragraph. It seems like we should, I mean, maybe it's just, I like to use more words than necessary, but I think there should be something that points to something a little bit more specific than state law.
Councilmember Jorgensen, would you be opposed to general powers? The officers and members of the police department shall have power necessary to comply with the oath of office. We just had a painting ceremony.
Relative to law enforcement?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you scope it, I mean, just give a little bit that we're talking right now in this code about law enforcement and Idaho state code law enforcement.
I see.
Well, to council, to the council president's statement, the oath, our officers are swearing to abide by federal, state, and local Garden City codes, so it
I
seems
think it
like
even
that.
names the U.S. Constitution in
U.S.
there,
Constitution, yeah.
in the oath.
Correct. I think it's fantastic as long as we throw on that relative to law enforcement, right? Because I took an oath, you took an oath. If I'm randomly looking through code, which oath are we referring to?
Chief, do you have an opinion?
A lot of this comes straight from there.
This is super exciting stuff that the audience is enthralled with.
Council President, Page Mayor. No, sir. Either way, this oath is in our policy. It's an ICOPA standard, and so, and it's just specific to our office as Garden City Police Officer. And then when you promote to corporal, sergeant, lieutenant, you take a separate oath. It says the same thing. It's a title change.
Would you read that language, Chief?
Yeah, yes, sir. So, for example, for today, it said, I, Tyler James Schaefer, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Idaho, the laws and ordinances of Garden City, Idaho, and I will perform the duties of the office of Garden City Police Officer according to the law and the best of my ability.
I like it.
And then if it were, for example, we were promoting someone to lieutenant, the office of Garden City Police Lieutenant. It's the only change it would be. It's just specific to the rank that they'd be holding.
Everybody good?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Have you got that, Mr. Wadums?
I do. I'll go back and listen to the audio. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I did have one other question.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
On page 90, I noted that public notice is changed from the Idaho Statesman to the Idaho Press Tribune.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I know readership of the Statesman is tanked, but do we know if we have more readership of our city and from the Idaho Press Tribune? I mean,
The Press Tribune has a greater circulation
Okay.
than the Statesman, and that's what makes it our paper of record.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, I did some research. I have a legal memo that will be in the packet when, if this is continued tonight, it'll be in the packet for the next time. And the Idaho Code requires that we have an official newspaper. It does not require it to be the Idaho Statesman or the Press Tribune, or if there are other ones, at Boise Weekly or whatever. Staff thinks that the Press Tribune probably has the best circulation. And I think it costs less money to publish things, perhaps, and so it's a cost savings, and I think that has more readership. And I think Ms. Lleiby had maybe additional reasons why she wanted that, but legally we can do that. Yes.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, we are also following a suit of other jurisdictions. Many other jurisdictions are switching to the Press Tribune, and because they do have a more local presence as well.
Mr. Mayor, to
Yes.
the point earlier, why not keep it generic to our official paper, right? That may change, and it avoids the need to go in and amend this.
I have an answer for that, Council President. Mayor, Council President Page, it's because the Idaho Code requires that we designate. It's something that the legislature has put on the cities way back in the beginning of time. Like why we have to publish in a newspaper at all instead of just posting online. That's because it's old legislation is the answer to your question, Council President.
Thank you.
Yep.
Because the legislators are all my age now.
No comment.
Okay. Are we good? Okay, the motion I'm looking for is to continue ordinance 1048-24 to a date certain of 11/25/24.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs? Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move to item G4. This is a second reading of ordinance 1054-24. Do you have anything to add, Lisa, on this one?
Mr. Mayor, there were no changes from the previous version.
Okay, any questions from the council? Okay, what's the pleasure of the council? This is a second reading by title only.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would move for the second reading of ordinance 1054-24 by title only.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Next, we got item G5. This is a public hearing on CPA FY 20.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, what did I do?
we need to read the title.
Oh,
He's excited.
okay,
I appreciate that.
make your age-related joke now.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Second reading of ordinance 1054-24, an ordinance of the City of Garden City, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, amending or repealing Garden City Code, Title II, Boards and Commissions, Chapter 1, Parks and Waterways Committee, Chapter 2, Library Board, Chapter 3, Garden City Arts Commission, amending or repealing all ordinances or parts thereof to the extent they conflict with this ordinance, providing all other ordinances included in the official code are still in effect, notwithstanding some provisions thereof being eliminated, providing for a severability clause, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Okay, now we will move to item G5. This is a public hearing on CPA FY 2024-4. It's a text amendment and is associated with proposed ordinance 1050-24. Ms. Thornborough, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight, there's the proposed ordinance amendment that the mayor just introduced is looking specifically at buffers and how the Land Use Development Code addresses buffers. Buffers may be how the different zoning districts interact with each other, as different zoning districts have different regulations, different heights, setback uses, et cetera. And it also can be between different intensities or types of uses within a singular zoning district. The staff report that was provided does reference a document that very succinctly summarizes a lot of best practices on how to handle buffering within a development code. And that really gets to showing what some of the densities look like, because that can be very hard to conceptualize. And so there's a number of different densities, whether it be 27 units per acre or 180 units per acre. And that document does a good job at showing pictures of actual developments around the country. It also talks about ways that are standard practices to integrate into your code for buffers. One of the things that is said over and over again as you have more densities or more intense uses, more urbanized uses, good streetscape and landscaping that emphasizes the pedestrian and pedestrian level architectural improvements and variety are necessary. In looking at our Garden City Code, the first thing that we looked at was appropriate zoning. If you look, this is a copy of is the zoning map. And if you look at the comprehensive plan, the zoning designations don't always exactly align. And so the proposal came through with looking at the mixed-use zoning district, which you can see currently in purple, as a potential to really start implementing the mixed-use residential on the east end of town. I do want to note and be very clear that while the proposal before you tonight may change regulations within zoning districts or within the development code, it would not actively rezone any property zoning designation. And so even if that mixed use is looked at as something that the city could utilize on the east end of town to start addressing that mixed use residential, it would not actively rezone those properties to that zoning district without a much more robust and different process being utilized, where the city would either have private applications come to the city and work with the property owners there, or the city could potentially have the ability to actively engage property owners to move down that path, should the city decide to do that, and by no means is that on the table tonight. And then back to the appropriate zoning. You'll see the R3 zoning district is kind of this, I'll call it a mustardy color. It's kind of sporadically throughout the city. It's in the comprehensive land use designations of mixed use residential, mixed use commercial, low density residential, medium density residential. And so again, that's one that really does not quite align with what the comp plan designations state, where there's one zone for multiple areas. And I believe that you might hear quite a bit of testimony specific to the R3 zone and how to handle that zone tonight. The R3 zoning district until 2014 had a height restriction of 45 feet. And until then, it also had a maximum density of 10 units per acre. In this draft proposal before you, there was public testimony from individuals, property owners on the east end of town versus the west end of town, really seeing that their properties look different, their desires for their properties look different, as well as there's that comp plan difference. And so of the designations, where one is intended to be truly residential, ranging from low density to medium density in the comp plan, and the other again is trying to address that mix of use and urbanization. The recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission was to add back in the height restriction of 45 feet, but only west of Glenwood, to not include that height restriction east of Glenwood. And then not recommended specifically by the Planning and Zoning Commission, but a start of a conversation during their hearing when they made the recommendation to the City Council, was that the code goes from R2, which is 6 units per acre, to R3, which is 35 units per acre. And the start of the discussion was, is there a middle zoning designation for residential that's not the low density, but not that medium density? And so in the draft ordinance that you found in your packet, there was highlighted and gray text language discussing this, or penciling in a discussion point for R3L. So an R3 zoning district, but the L would be for low density instead of that medium density, with an even lower height than was ever in R3. So a reduction in height to 35 feet, and then a maximum density of 20 units per acre. Again, that was something that was just kind of discussed briefly, but not in depth at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but there is the potential to discuss it further here tonight, should an additional zoning district be appropriate. If the City Council were to move forward with an additional district, staff would suggest that that could be something that could be utilized for the areas that the comprehensive plan designates more of that low density residential, and should remove that height requirement designation only to be west of Glenwood, and probably take that off altogether, because you would have another zoning designation that would have the height restriction that people could potentially, should they choose, rezone their properties to. Again, this does not rezone anybody's zoning classification of their property. And then other items that were addressed within the code. There's an addition when there is a mixed use zoning classification, to have requirements to require that there's an actual mix of uses unless there's a successful conditional use or plan unit development waiver granted. Based on testimony, there is another one of the highlights in section 7 of the draft ordinance that just had some clarifying words. And so the clarifying words are, when there's a development of greater than 50 development units and a density of 20 units per acre, 30% of the site, the word site has been added to clarify that needs to be dedicated to non-residential space, and it's noted and clarified that private open space doesn't count, instead of open space doesn't count towards that calculation. And again, that's in section 7 of the draft ordinance, and those are the 2 words that have been added. Outdoor lighting was addressed. Code currently does talk about the fact that parking areas need to be designed so that there's no trespass of light onto adjacent properties. But there's been additional language added to reduce light trespass from light in general. So building lights may be a good example of additional lights that could trespass. Fences and walls. New language has been proposed to reduce the impacts of fences and retaining walls on adjacent properties. And then in 2020, the city had convened a committee that had been working through the Boise River Ordinance, is what it was called at the time. And due to COVID, the city put a pause on that effort, And this ordinance does include some of the language that the committee had worked on, specifically with provisions on how setbacks interact with the green belt and nature path, and including frontage onto the green belt and setbacks from matters such as riparian areas, wetlands, or habitat. Setbacks, for the most part, have not been addressed. Some of the exceptions I've already addressed. So currently, again, in R3, it's penciled in that there'd be a height restriction reverting back to what was in place prior to 2014, 45 feet west of Glenwood. And as noted, the riparian wetland setbacks. There is a setback for mixed use. Currently, there's a maximum setback, but there's not a minimum front setback. And so there's a proposed 5-foot setback, a minimum setback from the street. And then in the C1 zoning district, there's a proposal that allows for 0-foot setback, so you can have attached ownership. I do want to note that currently, and not changing in the C1 zoning district, housing is a conditional use. And there's been further clarification that housing would only be appropriate adjacent to arterials if there's a connected sidewalk system, safe and convenient crossing, vehicular access points, and there's adequate usable open space. And one reason not to and then there's a conditional use for the housing, but there is a thought that businesses, particularly smaller businesses, may be able to utilize that 0-foot setback for smaller units, or maybe you'll see kind of like strip mall on a lot of the arterial type of development, and then you could have particular units that could be carved out instead of having a large mass of property. And then objective 7, and it's also for non-residential development as well as within the multifamily, includes provisions for visual privacy in R1, R2, and R3 zones. And should the council move forward with the R3L zone, that would be penciled in as well. Not specifically included in the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation was noise, addressing noise. The reason for that is over the years the city has reviewed wanting to look at noise with development and how that could be addressed. Currently in code, certain uses may be limited to certain hours. In general, the police department, and certainly the chief could speak if I'm mischaracterizing this, does have state statute that they can cite under if there's a disorderly conduct. In the past, I do remember at one point in time somebody brought in a blowhorn to demonstrate sound. But what happens if you have a sound meter on State Street, for example, immediately you might be over the decibel count. And so where the sound on the river might need to be much quieter. And so it's really hard to create regulations that are very specific to redevelopment or land uses. With that being said, one of those grayed out, yellow highlighted matters within the code are ways to reduce noise. Could include buffering outdoor spaces that may be active by addressing where refuse is located, building orientation, placement of structures, placement of vegetation, or a combination thereof. And again, that was something that staff has added since that discussion with Planning and Zoning Commission, not trying to address decibels, but ways that redevelopment could address noise adjacent to their neighbors in the R1, R2, and R3 zones. And with that, I know that I have given you a lot to chew on in a very quick presentation, and I'd like to stand for any questions.
Any questions at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So making sure I understand the height limit that's being proposed. So west of Glenwood, does the proposal include everything west of Glenwood, or just the R3 areas within that is west of Glenwood?
Mayor, Councilmember Rasmussen, thank you very much for that clarifying question. It's a very important one. It is just in the R3 zoning districts west of Glenwood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
to clarify, Mr. Homer, so P and Z recommended reinstating the 45 feet for R3, but I don't see them recommending the R3L. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, that is correct. They did recommend reinstating that 45-foot height limit in the R3 zone west of Glenwood. However, their discussions touched on the fact that there's not an intermediary residential zoning district between kind of that 35 units and the 6 units. And so staff has just added what that could look like should the council want to move forward with something like that. It wasn't a robust discussion, it was just a passing discussion, and staff has put that in gray and what that could look like. And I did fail to mention the uses would be the exact same uses that are identified, the allowable uses that are identified for R3 as penciled in currently. So really the only difference would be a reduction in density and a reduction in height.
Thank
Okay,
you.
anything else for this moment in time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll get the sign-up sheets. While Colin's bringing those up, I'll open the public hearing on CPA FY 2024-4. Okay, I know Wendy's got some,
I did put my name, Mr. Mayor. I was assuming all these people signed up.
okay. Sure.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Hannah Ball, 215 East 34th Street, Garden City, Idaho. And in looking at buffer zone code, there is a lot packed in here. And specifically, as I think as many people in this neighborhood can agree, the east end and the west end have functioned in two very different capacities. I totally agree that Marigold and Glenwood West should be rezoned and downzoned to a better appropriate height restriction as well as zoning density. In this code specifically, there's just a lot to unpack. Even the retaining wall, as that applies to the east end, a lot of conflict there. Right now it currently says setback 10 feet from sidewalk. We're seeing realistically more of a 5-foot setback based on that measurement coming in to date. So again, I just think that the variation between what this code is hoping to achieve Marigold Marigold West versus East End, totally different. I think the force and the requirement of mixed use creates a lot of conflict that I don't think we have enough clarity as to the two different uses or what the variety of uses we're really trying to put in the East End are. Another item, C1 zone, I think there's a lot of vague language there, a lot of conflict coming down the pike on that one. So again, this is a lot of code that is used very different in the different parts of town. So I would just advise to try to dissect it and look at it through the lens of the neighborhoods and how they are highly different as they're being used currently. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions, council? Thank you. Wendy, did anybody else sign up other than you? You're representing the group? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Well, welcome. We'd love to hear from you. For the record, council, before Wendy starts, everybody got a copy of her submittal
Yeah.
Friday?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening. I'm Wendy Carver-Herbert. I live at 8515 West Atwater Drive in Garden City. So I speak today on behalf of the River's Edge, River Woods 1 and 2, and Willowbrook HOAs and various neighbors in surrounding neighborhoods. Tonight, we stand in support of this current application as it most specifically addresses and relates to the maximum height restriction of 45 feet in R3 zone properties west of Glenwood, and also the visual privacy components that were added into the language to really begin to address some of the challenges that existing single-family and low-density neighbors face when a multifamily development is built adjacent to it. So I see that all of you did have a chance to read through my letter, so I don't really, it's not my intent to really hash through a lot that's in there. There's a lot of detail in there, and certainly willing to address anything that you have, but I wanted to address a little bit of additional context in terms of why stepping forward about this. Many of you may be aware that in 2019, there's a 5-acre lot just west of here on Strawberry Glen that was proposed to be developed. It was originally came before the city as a project of about 120 units. Several of the buildings were 4 stories. Sorry, that would have been lovely. 4 stories tall, and several of those buildings were only 15 feet from our property lines. All of the homes that are adjacent to it are all single family, single story. I think there might have been 1 or 2 stories within the mix. As a result of existing city code at that time, that project did not get approved. As a result of information we brought forward, some of the visual images that you see in your packet from me tonight, we brought forward and presented a fairly convincing case. But what made that project a little bit different than what I think the situation that I see ourselves in today is it was different because it was along the river, and at that point in time, the Boise River overlay was in place, which required a site plan. It just required several different things that really made that and gave the city the ability to be able to hear out its neighbors and make the decision that that was not the right project, at least with the design that was presented at that point in time. The project was denied. Well, obviously, the developer, being a good developer, came back to the city and said, what's it going to take to be able to get this thing developed? And good Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. This is a story you actually relayed to me, had shared with the developer, well, you need to go work it out with the neighbors. And they did. I have to really commend Kennedy Wilson, who developed that property. They actually did come and meet with us. We actually sat around a table in my backyard with a group of neighbors, and they presented a different idea and a different vision of how that could be developed. They brought forward a creative idea of two-story, a hybrid building of two-story view sheds from those buildings that shared an adjacent property line, with 3 stories on the other side. They also brought forward the idea of placing garages in between as buffers. And they also sat down and they truly listened to and incorporated several of the ideas and the feedback that we provided as neighbors and accommodated many of those things. All of those things that we learned as neighbors from that project were the things that we brought forward as recommendations for this particular buffers ordinance, particularly as it relates to visual privacy. So the challenge with R3 zone properties today, particularly if you happen to be within the core of the city, there's really not a lot of tools in the zoning toolbox to be able to say, gee, you should probably put these things in here because it's not required within city code. And that's why we're bringing these things forward. What I wanted to be able to talk a little bit more about is the comprehensive plan and the zoning map. So obviously you're all very familiar with the zoning map. You're also very familiar probably with the future land designation map. But the areas that we're talking about west of Glenwood, all the green area here, that's all considered low density residential. This orangish area right here is medium density. I think I'd really like to be able to emphasize that the majority of these neighborhoods are already built out. We all recognize that we know that there is infill opportunity within several neighborhoods throughout the city, and our neighborhood is not excluded from that. But there is a good portion of property within this medium density that's already built out as low density residential. In fact, if you go back to the zoning map, we have this neighborhood right along Coffee, and along Coffee and Marigold, it is R2 zone property that happens to be adjacent to the R3 zone properties. We really believe that we are at risk of having development that is not really compatible and doesn't really fit within our neighborhood. And so that's why we brought forward the ideas of creating buffer ideas and the request to take the zoning height at a minimum, taking the height back to the original 45 feet of what R3 was back in 2015. I laid out for you in my letter all the reasons that we believe that it's so important to be able to take a historic look back at that, because there are so many people who lived in these neighborhoods that had no idea that that change happened, and yet how it could dramatically change the possibility of and the future of what that neighborhood looked like. And when we talk about what our neighborhoods look like, the comprehensive plan is essentially the vision of what is laid out. It provides a very nice and beautiful picture that we see the west side of the city is predominantly residential, is intended to be developed in that way. We have the east end of the city, particularly south of the river, that's intended to be more mixed use. And as we all are very aware at this point, we know very clearly that the comprehensive plan is an important tool, but yet we know that it is not the law-binding document that can be used when making zoning decisions. State law also requires that zoning should be in accordance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan I look at as being like the foundation. The foundation, it sets the vision for how we want our city to look, and the zoning then in turn should be designed in a way that supports that comprehensive plan and the vision that's laid out in that. And I think we have some struggles as a city, quite frankly, about how we're able to roll out the vision that we want to with the existing zoning code we do. And I can tell you that I believe that with the zoning code the way that it is today, with the R3 zoning, with no height restriction, with making the dramatic leap of 250% from 10 units an acre to 35 units an acre, was nothing that any of our neighbors had any idea or even contemplated of what that can mean in our low and medium density neighborhoods. So I would ask tonight that I really would love for you to address, at a minimum, the height restriction. As I mentioned in my letter, I'm not asking you to necessarily tackle the density question tonight, because I think that there are some more conversations that deserve to be had. I think that was certainly what the intent of the P&Z, in terms of at least being open and talking about the conversations and deciding really what's the right decision for our neighborhoods. But I would really hope that this council would be open to the idea that trying to fix that and bring our neighborhood into more accordance with this vision would be really appreciated. And if you're looking for any more support in your thought process around this, I'd just like to be able to throw these definitions back up again. These are definitions taken from the comprehensive plan in 2006. That was the original comprehensive plan. These are also the definitions that existed at the time that the 2015 decisions were made to remove the height restriction and to increase the density from 10 units to 35. If you take a look at the comprehensive plan definitions as of July 8th, 2024, those definitions are essentially the same. And what is even more striking to be able to point out is the residential medium density definition says this designation allows for detached and attached dwelling units, including duplexes and townhouses. And what I have to say is, I don't see within that vision that it was really intended to be multifamily developments. I mean, I think we're thinking of townhouses, which would be a much more appropriate fit for going back to what this vision lays out for us. So again, I would ask for your support to support the changes that have been brought forward. We did that through the process. We participated in the neighborhood meetings, brought this information forward, and would ask for that positive support tonight.
Thank you. Questions, council?
No, thank you.
Miss.
Did you have, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
I apologize.
You can't let Wendy sit down yet.
Would you mind sharing how many meetings have you had with the neighbors in the neighborhood? You individually or you as a group? This is very well thought out, and I really sincerely appreciate all of the effort into it, and I applaud all of you.
Well, certainly when the neighborhood meeting came up for this particular ordinance change, I put the call out to any of the neighbors that wanted to participate in that meeting, and there was a handful that did. And so there was the neighborhood meeting that the city, it was a requirement of this ordinance change that we participate at, and that's where feedback was provided at that particular time about the thoughts of kind of the risks that we believe that we're in our neighborhoods. So in terms of talking with meetings, it's mostly been through communication of sharing emails about what the city is contemplating, what are some things that are being proposed, and why I'm supportive of trying to help that change. As you all know, zoning code is very, very complicated. And I could tell you, I'm grateful for the people that are here tonight, that they took the time to be here and to, take a step forward and say, this makes sense to us and this is why we need to do it. But as I said, I put the call out at least to the network of people that I had, and this is where we're at.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Did we miss anybody? Okay. Council, I'm not closing the public hearing just yet. There's a lot of information that's been presented to the City Council, both in the original packet and the supplemental information that has been presented. I hope you don't mind if I just call you Wendy. I've known Wendy a long time, so I kind of first naming Wendy. So anyway, how best to deal with this situation, recognizing the differences between the part of the city east of Glenwood and then part of the city west of Glenwood. I guess I just wanted to throw something out for the council to consider. Before we get to a point where we're trying to read an ordinance for the first reading and then trying to amend it as we go through the reading process, if the council is agreeable, we could hold the public hearing open, absorb all this information, that particularly this new information we got Friday, and convene a work session at our next council meeting and collectively noodle this a little more. And get this a little further down the road before we try to incorporate or instruct Mr. Wadhams on what we want to incorporate in an initial ordinance draft. So we aren't in this constant amending ordinances between readings. So that's just my thought. Well thought out. There's some. I'm being a little selfish because I'd like to be able to think about some ways to mitigate and deal with these differences. And there might be some other options in addition to what we've heard tonight. So anyway, my 2 cents. Council President, I'll turn it to you for any further discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I'm a fan of work sessions. I think it levels the communication barriers that are presented by the dais. And once we all start talking and making eye contact in a less formal way, we really can hear each other better. So I absolutely think the idea of holding the public hearing open and scheduling or convening a work session, I would support that.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, as would I. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Mr. Mayor, fellow council members, I 1,000% would appreciate that. I think Ms. Ball said it very, very well. There's a lot here to unpack, and I want to do it justice. The creativity, the need. I believe there is a need, and I think there's a lot of reasons to seriously consider this code, but to ensure that we get it right. There's so much conflict and some ambiguity, and I actually would want more clarity around the density. I know, Ms. Thornborough indicated that P&Z kind of touched on it. I think that's one topic that we should really flush out. If we're going to do this code, I think it should, let's give it our best effort. And I would, strongly love to hear more participation. The word, not that Ms. Herbert didn't do justice to everybody's concern, but open it up, get more one-on-ones, get public feedback and input. And for me, I candidly would like to see some more visuals. That helps me kind of wrap my head around what the result of some of the words would be. So I would also, I appreciate the suggestion, and I support it and would actually request that we hold the public hearing open until we can have a work session, and then continue the code and bring in code written as a result of the work session.
Okay. Councilmember Jacobs? If somebody would be willing to, Councilmember Page, would you take on the motion?
Mayor, Council President Page is contemplating that motion. Staff does have one request. If you do continue to allow for a work session, if you could continue to a date certain, so we don't have to renotice.
Oh.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. I would recommend December, 12th?
I believe it's the 9th, Mr. Mayor.
9th.
Mr. Mayor, How much time would you like to reserve for the work session?
I think we could spend an hour or 90 minutes on this topic, frankly, pretty easily. Part of it's going to depend on how we internally can kind of kick around the best way to do this. And I'm sure, hopefully Wendy would be available to kind of enter into some discussions with us. If not, I'd ask Dale to make sure she does. But you've got a good representative in Wendy, and she understands a lot of this, and I'm just really guessing. I mean, we get talking about this stuff, and the time just goes. And frankly, if we don't get it done, we continue it again and do another work session. I mean, I
do not see this being ironed out in an hour and a half.
Get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever the tolerance of the council is, I don't know what's going to be on the agenda at our next council meeting. If we have a light meeting, we can dedicate quite a bit of time.
And I think that's something to consider is if the mayor would be open to limiting the agenda on whatever night that we have this first work session to urgent matters only. That would be fantastic.
Okay.
Maybe we could even go longer than an hour and a half.
Sure. I mean, I'm good. None of us get overtime, so there's no.
One request, I'm gonna be out of town on the 25th, so I could zoom in on that day, but it.
December 25th, we will not be
no,
having.
the next council meeting.
Oh, okay.
November 25th.
Oh,
Are we
okay, very good.
continuing to
November
date certain
25th. So if it's the
December?
night, it'd be something I'd probably prefer to be in person, so I don't know if we can extend it to not the night. But
Well,
I
For
can-
clarity, will you be here December 9th and not?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's just, I'm gone the week of Thanksgiving, so I was gonna
Okay.
zoom in.
well, if we hold the hearing open and continue this till December 9th, then we can poll the council. I may call a special meeting work session if there's a time when we can all get together, if we can get it noticed up ahead of time. So
That's the first council meeting.
I think if we get the December 9th date, and if we're not ready December 9th, we'll continue it again. But there is a lot to unpack here, a lot of detail.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
with regard to CPA FY 2024-0004, commonly known as Code Text Amendment buffers, I move for keeping the public hearing open with our next meeting to be a work session, date certain, December 9th.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. You indicated in the motion a work session.
So does everyone know what a work session means? Okay, so no decisions, no binding decisions are made in work sessions. It's more formal than spitballing, but it is where the real work gets done. City staff obviously does all the heavy lifting, and we appreciate them for that. But then a decision, a formal adopting of new ordinances takes place in a council meeting like this. So the work session is just an opportunity to iron out the details, the nuts and bolts, stuff that can take hours, and will take hours.
The date certain for the public hearing to remain open is a formal procedure, and if we set that for December 9th, and then work the work session either before that, or if we have to, I can add the work session to December 9th, and we can continue the public hearing formal action again if we need to. But I've got to have a date certain for the public, for the CPA FY 2024-4 component.
Okay,
This
let me
formal-
amend my motion.
Okay.
With regard to CPA FY 2024-0004, I move that we hold the public hearing open until December 9th, that date certain of December 9th, 2024.
Thank you. I have a second.
Second.
The seconder agrees. Okay.
I second
I
myself.
got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Thank you. Item G6 is not applicable this evening, so we'll move item G7. This is also a public hearing on Resolution 1187-24. This is a Public Works fee schedule change. If
They're all very excited about
I
this.
was going to say,
Talking about
You
sewer
know,
and water, it's
if the,
exciting.
if the beans are burning, you can go home. So we'll just pause for a moment.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good night.
Or we could do that.
Great job.
Yeah.
That's an option. I don't mind you make one side.
The mayor will agenda that up, but it sounds like we might even be looking at another date, but at least on December 9th. Yeah. Oh,
Wendy, we'll make it work. Don't, you know, if you can't be here the 9th, then we'll move it.
well, you definitely need to be here.
Oh, yeah. No.
I think you're going to be the
Well,
mouthpiece for the majority of people.
Mr. Mayor, wouldn't we invite the public? Couldn't we have the public to be here for the work session?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We just,
And we would likely solicit input.
yeah. But
Good to see you. Great job.
Good job, Wendy.
Great presentation.
I'll give you a call. Okay, now we can move to item G7, Public Hearing Resolution 1187-24. That's in your packet. Are there any questions on that? This is, we're kind of captive
sir.
to Boise.
No question here.
Okay.
No, sir.
Is there anyone, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the room that wishes to testify? Seeing no one, do we have anybody online at all?
No, we don't have any way for them to testify.
Okay. All right, so let the record reflect that no testimony was provided, and we'll close the public hearing for Resolution 1187-24. Turn to the council for action.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve Resolution 1187-24 for Public Works fee schedule, amendments, rather.
I second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Thank you. Item G8, this is also a resolution 1188-24. This is allow me to enter into a new contract for plan review and inspection services with the Department of Department of Public,
Professionals
Professional
and licensing. I think.
okay, or the state building inspection services we have. That's on page 204. I'm sorry, page 186. Are there any questions for Jenna on that one?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I apologize. Was somebody else going to say something?
What?
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Oh,
certainly.
Sorry.
You can always ask a question.
I thought Lisa was about to say something. I'm like, oh, sorry. So on page 188, Mr. Wadhams apparently made a recommendation for the contract. And my question is for amendments, or I believe it was attachments. Were the attachments included in here? Or did I not see that?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, if they were not included, the attachment is a general addendum that all contracted contracts need to adhere to, and perhaps Mr. Wadhams can do better, but it's essentially where individuals buy and purchase their goods can't discriminate against certain countries. With that being said, I did hear back later this afternoon to Mr. Wadham's request that addendum be allowed, and also that a non-exclusivity clause be added. The state said that they are very happy to add the addendum, and they feel that the absence of an exclusivity clause is, in essence, a non-exclusivity clause. And so Mr. Wadhams didn't know that information until right now. I don't know if that changes his feelings on how this is drafted. The staff report did note that there is an increase in fees to the city for most services, and there is also at some level an increased loading on particularly the front staff that enters in the permits. But with that being said, we currently right now do not have our contract with Safe Built can't support the commercial services due to particular credential requirements that they don't have. So we don't have a backup right now.
They're a sole source provider for us. We really don't have a lot of latitude to negotiate. They have a standard contract, of my understanding, that applies to all the cities they serve. And getting a carve out for us is not going to happen. That's bottom line. You will be seeing, hopefully you'll approve this so we can process permits, but we'll be bringing back in the near future some rate adjustments, fee adjustments that are going to be necessary to mitigate the additional costs we're going to incur and have been occurring over time. Just inflationary impacts and then this contract increase.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I reluctantly move to approve resolution 1111 or 1188-24.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item, G9, Resolution 1189-24. This is a memorandum of understanding that our Ada County cities and the county are entering into with Valley Ride to provide for emergency transportation in the event of an evacuation. It's on page 204. Fairly self-explanatory. Be happy to address any questions if you have them.
No question.
Hopefully we'll never need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Incidentally, this would probably only occur, an emergency that would require this to be utilized would be after a declaration, emergency declaration was made by the mayor. That emergency declaration by the mayor, and likely in this kind of a situation in the county, would fulfill a requirement necessary to get reimbursed on expenses from Federal Emergency Management Agency. So we declared an emergency in the 2016-2017 Snowmageddon time when we were down on the east end packing sandbags. And that was so if we needed some extraordinary help, the mayor would have the latitude to go get the help, and we'd figure out how to pay for it later, kind of a thing, and then submit for reimbursement. So, yeah. So anyway, that's what that is. Any questions? What's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve Resolution 1189-24, Memorandum of Understanding.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. We'll now move to new business one. Council, I just wanted to visit with you. This is called a work session. It's more of an update on this piece, and then we're going to have an executive session here in a few minutes to deal with some specific personnel-related discussions. I've been around a long time, and I have never in my career here been in a circumstance where we had as many ordinance changes, as many ordinances to consider as we have in kind of a compressed form now. We've got a lot of stuff going. We've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. In deference to my successor, I've really pushed to try and get this stuff through as fast as we can. Frankly, that was an error. We can't, and this tonight was an example, you can't, by edict, ramrod a lot of this stuff through. We've had a situation where we're bringing ordinances to you. We've had some tonight where we are amending these as we go through the reading process. We need to have these ripe for presentation in a formal setting before we get into the process. Between readings isn't the place to make formatting or grammatical changes, or really we want to minimize even the wordsmithing. So I had a meeting with Lisa and Charlie and Jenna, and the protocol I intend to utilize is that we are going to utilize work sessions more and get these ordinances in a form that we're comfortable with, and before we draft them. Charlie's going to draft the ordinances. Legal's going to draft the ordinances. They're legal documents. And that, I think, will minimize how many times he has to look at them, hopefully. That's the idea. And if it's the council that's initiating an ordinance change request, if it's the staff, then the initiator, we will work on the language in the work sessions and get what we want to say figured out and discuss any consequences related to that. And once we kind of have that figured out, that's a package, and we can give it to Charlie, and Charlie will create an ordinance, and then we can start it through the process. Some of these are complicated. Some of them have to go, if they're Title VIII, they're going to have to go through the Planning Commission. We're going to have neighborhood meetings. We're going to have to, well, we may need more than one meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission may need a work session before they make their decision. We may need a work session to discuss the Planning and Zoning work session or the recommendation. We may not. Some of these that are ministerial, Title I, Title II, that don't need to go through that noticing same neighborhood meeting and planning and zoning and those things, those we can handle pretty efficiently, and we'll be doing that. But we've got to slow this down, and we'll discuss this further in a few minutes. But the staff loading is something that we need to be very cognizant of, and we're going to have to move at the rate we can absorb this. We have, for the last 2, maybe 3 years, talked about hiring somebody to do some of this code change work. We've had some success with a very competent intern that we had, was it the spring semester?
Summer.
Anyway, huh?
Summer.
Summer, okay. But that's a hit and miss, and frankly, our staff isn't going to just hand this over to somebody and hope it turns out all right. It's not in her DNA. So what I'm hoping and what I intend to do is bring these through at a pace that we can absorb them. That'll ebb and flow a little bit with the other things going on. If Hannah's going Mach 2 with her hair on fire, that may slow some things down because we may need to help her a little bit, and we'll talk about how that might happen. And then as applications ebb and flow, that's going to help our pace. But we're just going to have more work sessions. And we've been very fortunate, I think, that we have efficient council meetings. It's 7:35. My friends over at the City of Eagle probably haven't got through the consent agenda yet. So we're blessed here. But we're going to do the work sessions as part of the council meeting at the end of the meeting, so we don't get artificially constrained and we don't have to bring people in early because all 4 of you work for a living. And then the work session will last as long as our tolerance allows it to last after a meeting, and if we're done, great. If we get what we want done and conveyed to Charlie, then he'll draft the ordinance. So that's what we've got to do, I think. And I think it will make Charlie's time more efficient as far as review. I'm hoping to minimize I hope to organize the interaction between planning and legal where it's more profitable for everybody, more efficient. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to share. I haven't codified any of this in writing because the 4 of us, that's Jenna and Lisa and Charlie and me, realize that we're going to tweak this process as we go. We're going to figure out, we're going to learn some things. But I think we're going to have a great product to present to the public when we get to the stage where we want to present it to the public. It's really what planning and zoning is doing now, to be honest with you. They have work sessions, they kick this stuff around, and they get it to a point. And sometimes we're going to get something from planning and zoning that's clean, and it's going to go right through here. And sometimes, like we experienced tonight, it gets more complicated. So anyway, any thoughts or anybody?
I think that's a great idea to do it at the end of the meeting, because I always found the work sessions to be constrained by 6 o'clock start time. And then, I don't know how everybody else feels, but if we ever have to have a work meeting off week, we'll do that too, right? Where we just meet on
Pickup sessions.
Yeah, just have a work session off week, whatever we find a date that works for everybody, and
we can
not even it depends on the urgency and the need, right? But sometimes it might be good just to meet and that's all we talk about, not even have it attached to a council member and start at 5 or 6.
I couldn't agree more.
So I'm open for that too, so I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but
so
get her done.
Yeah, and the workload ebbs and flows.
Right.
We've had 3 years of huge projects, probably. I mean, just, you know, I'm waiting for Hannah to correct me. It's been 7 years. No. You know, but the rate of the boardwalk and the plantation type projects is going to slow down, and that's going to help too. But anyway, always open for suggestions. But I think we're going to start out that way. And this is an example. I'm going to get a hold of Wendy and have a little discussion with her and try to drill this down. As she mentioned, height and density. If that really are the two particular issues, then we've got a lot of talent on our staff. We start noodling how we can deal with that, whether it's through the ordinance that's presented here, whether it's through some other mechanism. We've got a couple ideas, one particular idea that I can't share yet. But so anyway, that's what we're going to do.
I like it.
Okay. Let's move into our executive session. I'll need a motion to do that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move for executive session in accordance with Idaho Code 74206B.
Okay.
After which we will not adjourn?
No,
or,
we will adjourn,
without
yeah.
a decision?
Correct.
I'd second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Second.
Okay. Clerk, call the roll.
Oh, sorry.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Okay, thank you. For this portion, I'm going to release everybody but Hannah and Jenna.